Today, I'm going to share with you 10 lessons that I had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. I turned them into my 10 commandments for set life, and what I'm hoping is that by hearing these things, you don't have to make the same mistake that I did. Hey guys, my name's Hans Christopher. I am an actor, coach, and creator of the Working Actor series. If you're liking this content, please like and subscribe below. And with that, let's dive in. Number 1, learn how to fuck up like a pro. Now, what do I mean by that? You can tell when an artist or an actor is green on set when you're shooting and everybody's in it and you're going, and then they mess up their lines, and instead of it being no big deal, it becomes like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Can we do it again? I'm so sorry. And then that makes everybody very uncomfortable, and that makes everybody have this feeling of like, oh God, you know. And what you notice very quickly when you're on set with actors who are, you know, big actors, people who've been doing this for a long time, is they'll fuck up their lines too. Some actors I know fuck up their lines a lot, but it's the way that they handle the way they fuck up. They don't even view it as a fuck up, honestly. They view it as a part of the process. And it's very, very different when they do mess up their lines. It's a process that is much more like, let's just take that back. Or sometimes they don't even say that. When you get in a good relationship with the director and how you work, you know how they can edit stuff already, and you'll just take yourself back and continue the scene without ever pulling yourself out of character. And it just makes everybody around you feel comfortable, feel like they're taken care of. Even when you mess up, you're fine. You're just going to keep going with it. It's a great, great mentality and lesson you can also take into your auditions, because especially in-room auditions, it's the same thing. If you get them to a place where, like, let's just take that back. They feel like you know what you're doing. They feel like you have this under control, even in a fuck up. It's actually an opportunity for you to show that you are more of a professional than green or an amateur. So that's number 1. Number 2, define your boundaries, what you are willing to do and not to do, and do not break them for anyone. Now, I have learned this lesson the hard way too many times, and I know friends that have learned this lesson the hard way. With women, nudity is a big thing. Thankfully, we have intimacy coordinators now, but not all intimacy coordinators are the best. You have to know how to use them. What intimacy coordinators are great for is if you have defined your boundaries and what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, you communicate that to them exactly. And as long as you have that laid out, you do not break. You do not go past what you said you would do. It's going to make you much more comfortable. It's going to make things feel much better. And I'm also talking, this also has to do with your look. I learned this lesson the hard way last year. I wanted to work with these directors. It was a really big job, not a huge role, but they asked me if I was willing to shave. And I said no. I turned it down. I said no. And they were like, okay, well, would you be willing to shave just a small spot? It'd be like a little piece in the back of your head. And I was like, well, I feel like that wouldn't be that big of a deal. I'm cool with that. And I wanted to work with these guys so bad, and it was a huge production. So I was like, fuck it, let's do it. So I did it. I show up to set, and all hell's going on. They're right next to this huge scene that's happening, and they come up real quick, and they kind of look at me, and they're like, yeah, it'll be good. We'll just do this. And so I have to show up in the makeup chair the next morning at 3 a.m. And I go, and the first thing that they do is that the piece that they take off is literally like 1.5 inches right in front. And immediately that means I'm going to have to shave my head. So I feel like because I didn't establish my boundaries, because I wasn't clear with what I was okay with and what I wasn't, I didn't put myself in a position to get taken care of. I put a lot of work into headshots and preparing myself to be this kind of look with longer hair and the things that I did. I had nothing to prepare me to have a shaved head, and casting didn't know me in that way. So for me, that was a huge mistake, because I didn't set my boundaries, didn't say it was okay, or at least put a price on what that was worth to be able to do something like that. So that was a lesson learned. And then I've also learned this lesson with stunts. It's the exact same thing. You need to know what you're okay with doing, because if you are not prepared with stunts, you as an artist, we are trained to be truthful and to be honest. And I did a job a few years ago where I had a stunt person come in. He was supposed to do this big scene where he sprints, falls down, jumps onto a fence and falls down. They do one take with a stunt guy, and then, I go up there, and I played soccer my whole life. I've been active, and I was like, I could do this. And the director kind of looks at me, he's like, you want to give it a shot? And I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it, So I do it, and I fall down, and everything goes great, and I get to the fence, I fly up, I get pulled down, he flips me around, throws me onto the mat. Everything goes amazing, right? They cut, stunt guy, everybody comes up like, oh my God, that was fucking incredible. That was amazing. And I'm like, yeah, that was great. Maybe I skinned up my knee and I cut my hand up a little bit, but that was amazing. Well, then they go, okay, let's do it again. And let's do it again. Okay, now we're going to do it from this shot and do it again. And I'm not trained. If you're not trained in stunts, you are not trained to do stunts and do things to not hurt yourself. I go all out, and that's what I do. And at the end of the day, I am so lucky that I didn't hurt myself bad. But at the end of the day, I was so cut up and beat up and bleeding and bruised and limping, and it was not a good situation. And I've heard horror stories of little things like jumping off of a ledge and doing things. You have to look out for yourself in those situations, and you have to define your boundaries. So that was a little bit of a long one, but it's really, really important, especially if you're new to set. Number three, and I think this is a very valuable lesson. I learned this from a friend of mine I shot a film with a couple years ago, and he basically said, you've got to learn to embrace the chaos of set life. What he said was that every single set, every film, everything he's been on has been a different kind of chaos. Every director's different. There's always time crunches. There's always these constraints. And you've got to get yourself to a place where you can live in the chaos and you can do your work in the chaos. So one thing that I say is it's great to be able to go to a class where you feel comfortable. It's great to set your audition space up to where you feel comfortable and get that child artist to come out. But if you're not doing things to consciously push yourself and try and get that child artist to come out in situations where you might not be comfortable, you're going to have a rough go when you first get on set and you first start going through some of these experiences. And I learned that the hard way, just like I learned all these the hard way. So, number 4, learn people's names and what they do. If you can do this before you get to set, it is going to pay off tenfold. You'll see why with the next thing, because it makes sense. But this is something that it's always been hard for me to remember names. But you want to build relationships, and this game is all about the relationships you build and the projects you continue to work on and the reputation you have as an actor. And unfortunately, it's very, very easy to be labeled a problem on set. I have another one of these for that you'll hear about. But you want to make sure you get names down right away, because there's also comes in situations where they're in chaos just like you're in chaos. They're have time constraints and things they're up against. And if they've developed a little bit of a relationship with you, they're going to be on your side. They're going to look out for you just a little bit more on set, and it's something that you want when you're in it. So this goes into the next thing that I'm going to say, which is number 5. As a day player, as a guest star, as a recurring, and even as regulars that I've seen who aren't top of show or who aren't number 1 or 2 on the call sheet, you have to look out for yourself. And what I mean by that is going back to what I was saying, sometimes hair and makeup, sometimes wardrobe have 50 people showing up that they have to do in ball gowns, and they don't have an assistant that showed up that day, and they have ridiculous constraints that they have to go to. And what's going to happen is they're going to ask if it's okay for me to go to set, and they're just going to look at me and be like, yeah, no, he's fine, even though they haven't done anything. And I know yesterday that I had to get stuff done under my eyes, or my goatee was different. You have to be at a place where you understand what's going on. Nobody knows your character better than you, and you just have to always kind of be looking out for yourself in those situations. You don't have to be rude about it, but say you shot until 4 a.m. the night before, and you've got bags under your eyes, and the continuity with the scene isn't going to look good if they haven't done anything under your eyes. You can just quickly ask and be like, hey, you think you could just hit my eyes up real quick before we go out there? they'll be super cool with it. They've got a lot of stuff they have to do. So you have to be able to look out for yourself and speak up for yourself. Number six. Just because there is no dialogue doesn't mean you don't have a lot to say. Some of you guys may have heard me learn this lesson the hard way. I learned this lesson the hard way on set because I showed up, I booked this role, I was very excited about it. I was there for a week, and the first scene that we were shooting on the first day was going to be a wide shot of me killing myself, picking up a gun and shooting myself, and then there was this whole story behind it that we were going to get in for the week. So I didn't really even think about that scene much. I was like, oh, this isn't going to be hard at all. Well, I show up, I get to set for that day. It was the day I flew in. No, it was the night before, but it was next morning early. And I show up to set, and all of a sudden the director's like, you know what, we're going to change this. We want you to walk in with her, and then we're going to punch in on you on a close-up on your face as you pull the gun out, look at the gun, and go through this process of shooting yourself. And for me, I didn't prepare that scene. I didn't prepare the internal life that I wanted to show up, especially if that's the introduction to my character and this storyline. That's going to be your snapshot to hook you in, and I wasn't prepared. And it didn't come out terribly, but I learned a valuable lesson that day in that you got to prepare those scenes even without dialogue just as deeply, especially when it's something like that. You just got to be prepared for it. So that was a valuable lesson I learned, and I'm glad I did. Hopefully you guys can get something out of that. So number seven. A small thing on set can snowball into a large problem very, very quickly. Set life is like a game of phone tag, and unfortunately, we as artists, we as actors are already fighting this name of being problems on set. An example that I'll use is, I'm going to pull all these because these lessons came from me, is I showed up to set one day, and it was the first time that I had done an S Corp. If you guys have been acting for a little while, you probably have an S Corp. I'll probably end up doing a lesson on filing an S Corp as an artist, because once you start working, you want to have an umbrella to be able to file as your company. It was the first project I booked under my S Corp, and I wasn't really sure how to go about doing that. So I get there, I get in wardrobe and stuff, and I asked the second AD who was making me fill out the paperwork, because I wasn't quite sure how I needed to fill something out, because I wasn't sure, because I just got my S Corp. Now, like I said, set life is chaos. Who knows what's going on that day? But just the question started a little bit of a chain that I was unaware of. And then a few days later, I'm on set. I'm in the middle of my scene. I have contacts in and wardrobe on and all this stuff. Somebody comes up to me and they give me a check. And it's written out to me. It's not written out to my company. And all I say, this is the only thing I say, is, oh, I'm sorry, I think this is supposed to be written out to my S Corp. And I just give them the check back. It was no problem at all. I had to go back onto set. At least I didn't think it was. And I finished shooting the day, and I get to my trailer maybe 2 hours later, and I have 15 calls from my manager, from my agent, email chains looped in with head of casting, with production, saying I'm being a problem on set. Looping it in with casting, looping it in with everyone. It was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever been a part of, because I go out of my way to be respectful, to be nice, to treat everybody nice. And I learned a really, really valuable lesson that day, in that things can snowball very quickly without you even being aware from it, just from a simple question, just from a simple action you take. And I had to try and put those pieces back together again, but it was a terrible situation. And I've heard many stories like that. So you just have to be aware of that when you're on set. Especially when you're in the situations like that, and stuff has to be fed down the chain to, from a second AD to producers to somebody else. Just be aware of that. So that was a valuable lesson I learned. Number eight. Learn to ask for what you need to do your best work. Now, you have to develop a little bit of a relationship with this. As you get on set, if you have a couple days, you've worked a little bit with the director, you've talked in rehearsal with stuff, or you've been lucky enough to, maybe it was a film, and you get to break it down with the director, you start to develop a little bit of a relationship, and you'll see if you can ask and what you can ask for or not. Sometimes you show up to a TV set and it's rigid and it's cold and you never even get to talk to anybody, and you can't do much in that situation. But there are still things you can do to prepare yourself. I'll give you an example that I learned the hard way. We're doing this scene. Once again, it's one of those scenes where we're up against time. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of extras that are doing way too many things. It's a one shot, and they keep messing up stuff so that everybody's getting frustrated, right? Well, lucky for me, I had this scene at the very end that buttons it up, where I open the door, pop my head in, say some stuff, look around at everybody, and then say one last thing. And so I was at the very end of this scene, and I learned the hard way that my reader, the person I was supposed to be looking at, they wanted my eye line to be camera. I did not ask for the person that was talking to me to move off so that they weren't in my eye line. And it is very, very difficult to be used to talking to the person you're reading with or you've been doing the scene with, and then all of a sudden change to the camera if that person is still behind the camera. It's going to take a while for you to get used to doing that if they're there. So a very simple thing that I could have asked for and didn't was to ask them to move off camera to the side, just so that I could just only focus on that piece of tape. Unfortunately, I learned that the hard way after they finally got through an entire full scene of maybe 4 minutes of doing stuff, and then I opened up and looked right at the person instead of the camera. So that is one of those things that I think is just one of those lessons that you got to learn the hard way, or hopefully you remember it here. Number 9, for movement scenes, be prepared for anything. Now, what do I mean by this? There's scenes that you see, they're called like walk and talks, where there's a lot of stuff going on, especially when you start shooting them in these ones. I learned this one the hard way. We had this scene that was shooting for a movie. We were shooting in a live prison, an active prison. We only had a certain amount of time where each wing was done. We were only going to be able to do my coverage before lunch, and they wanted it all done in a one, which, in preparation for it, I never thought it was going to be that. It didn't look like it would be that challenging. It was just going to look like us walking down by the cells. Well, when it came down to shooting the scene, I had to remember which cell to stop at. So that was one take that we learned that lesson, that if I had prepared for that would have been better, which every single cell looked identical, and there was no markers to be able to differentiate that. So I had to get a piece of tape and put it on the one I wanted. I had to start my line at the exact moment. I had a set of keys that weren't really keys, so I couldn't show that to camera, which was over my left shoulder. So I had to make sure I was blocking the keys enough to not see that it wasn't going into a keyhole, while also not covering the actor's face, who's right here, while delivering my lines, while opening up a cell door, which I had smashed my hand in. We thought we broke my hand the first rehearsal take, while saying the lines, looking to the left, going back, and making sure I delivered the lines exactly when I closed it. Again, with putting the keys away, and every single one of those steps, something had happened where the key fell out, something happens, and it's just, unfortunately, it comes down on you. And so, sometimes you're just going to get in situations where it's like that. But I could have prepared. The lesson that I learned out of this is that I could have prepared that scene, knowing that it was a walk and talk, knowing that we were going to be moving for chaos. I could have prepared that for anything. And I definitely will be doing that if I ever get a scene that is moving again, because it was just not a situation that was enjoyable. I got in my head. It was incredibly difficult to do. We'll see how it comes out. So that was something that I learned that way. Let's see. And that was number 9. And number 10, this lesson that I've learned many times over and over, is be prepared to shoot the rehearsal. Now, what that means is you will be sitting for hours sometimes in your trailer, and the second AD will come to you because they've been told something, and they'll be like, "Oh, we're just going to go down there and do a blocking rehearsal real quick." And so you'll leave your sides or your pen or something that you were going to bring down there in the trailer because it sounds like you're coming back. They think you're going to be coming back. You go down to do the blocking rehearsal, and all of a sudden the director just goes, you know what? Why don't we just shoot this? Let's just shoot this right now. And all of a sudden, 10 seconds later, you're actually putting the scene up, and you forgot that earring or you forgot that thing that you were supposed to have in the scene. And unfortunately, it looks like you've messed up. Ultimately, you didn't, but it's still, you don't want that to be the person who's not prepared. I've learned this the hard way many times in the sense of, they give you these little scripts when you're shooting, and just not having that and a pen has proved difficult, because I have many times where the writer or the showrunner will walk up and just come up to me real quick and be like, hey, you know what? We're going to change this line right here and do something like this. And then maybe let's try this here. I want to be able to just at least have that written down so I know. And I've made that mistake multiple times now where they said they were doing blocking rehearsal. I didn't bring my kit and my stuff down to be prepared. And, I had to I just didn't feel as taken care of and as prepared as I could have been. So that was something I've learned the hard way too. I'm sure there are many more, and I will continue to add to this list, but that is 10 things that I have turned into things that I make sure every time I book a job, every time I go onto set now, I look at those things and I say, this is not going to happen again. So, hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. And if you've ever been on set and you've fallen on your face or you had everything go wrong, kind of like I did, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments below, and maybe we can turn it into a lesson learned and ultimately a win for you and maybe any other actors that come and check this out. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next time.